I don't recall if it was during the first conversation or the subsequent conversation the following day, but he told me that he had obtained my resume from the Society of Ex-FBI Agents in New York City.
And did he describe the work that he wanted you to do?
On the initial phone call, he didn't go into explicit details. He said it was a matter of urgency, that if it was possible to come to Washington where he would like to interview me. But he did basically inform me that it would involve security work for the committee to re-elect the president, and at that particular time in specific some services with Mrs. Martha Mitchell, the wife of the Attorney General.
Now, when you entered room 419 on May the 26th, what did you see?
When I entered the room, there was numerous items of electronic equipment in the room. When I entered the room, it was approximately 2 p.m. in the afternoon, I believe, about that hour. And Mr. McCord was in the room and operating one of the receiver units. At that time, I didn't know what it was. He explained it.
Wow.
Operating a unit.
Wow. That's Alfred Baldwin III, a real professional douche who throws McCord under the bus. And it turns out to be a Democrat whose father was a bigwig in the Democratic Party, unbeknownst to McCord. This was a guy he hired to help him with the eavesdropping in Watergate, Alfred Baldwin III out of Connecticut. And that's why the guy interviewing him is Lowell Weicker, a guy that I met in his underwear at a party at his house in Sag Harbor, Long Island, because his daughter, a known lesbian, was very nice, went to college with us and invited us all to his house, a mansion, second house that he had. And I met him at 4 o'clock in the morning while he was going through the refrigerator. But a Republican, arch nemesis of Nixon, and he's interviewing him because Baldwin is actually from the state of Connecticut, which he was the senator from.
Makes sense. And today's winner is James McCord.
It's funny. Everybody believes that James McCord was a bumbling fool, like something out of Get Smart, something out of Maxwell Smart Agent 86, where he would just have this equipment that didn't work, and he was a bumbling fool. He's actually depicted by a friend of mine named Chris Bauer, the actor, in a recent podcast turned HBO series about the Watergate Break-in. And Bauer, no, there's another one called Soft Touch or something, or there's a podcast that was turned. It actually, when you start it, you see the guy who's the podcaster with a microphone, and then it goes into these reenactments. It's actually fairly creative, but highly inaccurate. I forgot what the name of it is. But anyway, so Chris Bauer is playing, who is a fantastic actor, Chris Bauer. The Wire, but also, 61 and with Thomas Jane. Thomas Jane and him are very close. All three of us very close, actually. Me, Tom, and Chris Bauer, to be frank with you. But yeah, fantastic actor on The Wire and other shows. But he plays James McCord, and James McCord is depicted in pop culture as being this bumbling idiot who left the doors open, taped them open, removed the tape on the Watergate, and led to their capture by Frank Wills. There's an actual photo of the doors being taped open by him as a bumbling idiot who led to their capture. That's the pop culture story. And now we're going to give you our story, which is a little bit more in depth than what people led to believe about Frank Walter McCord, who was born, I think, in 1925 in some place called Waurika, Oklahoma. To people from Oklahoma who know that, he was a second lieutenant bombardier, World War II. Seems to be a familiar trend among our subjects. 1924, 42, becomes an FBI radio operator after the war, and starts working for the FBI, doing radio eavesdropping on the Germans, even during the war, and the Soviets. 1948, they say he joins the CIA. His entire life is sketchy, and I'll tell you something right now. He was dead for 2 years until Jim DiEugenio found out he was dead. There was no obituary of his death. I mean, one of the most famous guys in Watergate, dead. This is another common theme among these people. They die and nobody notices they're even dead. 1964, he goes to the Air War College, studies political science. 65, gets out of there. 63, backing up a little bit to his career. He in 55 to 60. By the way, he goes to Baylor for a while, and then he goes to University of Texas at Austin. This is another typical situation, and then receives an MS in 1965 at the age of 41, Eric, because he gets out of UT in 49. And at the age of 41, 1965, receives a Master of Science from Georgetown University in International Affairs, which is like the spook service school over there. That's where everybody goes. You come out of there. I think that's where our friend
Amaryllis. Yeah.
Yeah, we were just talking about it. She went there, and everybody else went there who's a spook. Anyway, so he joins the CIA, but he's got this FBI background, and that's going to be a theme through a couple of these people. There's a guy named Lee R. Pennington, who is his mentor, and a much older man who was also like third in command of the FBI, a guy like completely under everybody's radar in security history. But in there's Pennington. He actually used, what's that?
It looks like he's with Hoover in this shot.
Yeah, he was Hoover's accountant. Among other things, he was like third in command of the FBI, but he was Hoover's personal accountant, among other weird kinds of things. So anyway, 48 CIA, 55 to 62, he works with a guy named Paul Gaynor. Now, Paul Gaynor will become a general. He'll become a brigadier general. I don't know if we have a photo of Gaynor, maybe at a lower rank. This is Gaynor. Now, Gaynor will be in charge of an organization called the Security Research Staff, SRS, and this is underneath the Office of Security. SRS, you say, well, what is that? I mean, this is the group, and if you saw Wormwood, if you know about Frank Olson, if you know about the jumping out of the window of Frank Olson, the Office of Security and the staff that is security research staff are the people, because a lot of people said, that McCord was just a security guard for the CIA. He was in charge of security of buildings. It's a crock of shit. Let me explain what this thing is, because it's far more complicated. You know, when they have, like the police will shoot somebody and then you have to go before the internal review board of the police. This is the same for the CIA. These are the guys who administer lie detector tests to the employees themselves. These are the guys who do the internal work of the CIA on the employees of the CIA. It's almost like their internal affairs, Eric, if you follow what I'm saying, for a big city police force, right? So he was, Alan Dulles said to Fletcher Prouty that he was his top man, that this guy was not a guy at the bottom of the pecking order. This is a guy who interrogated and worked with a program called Operation Bluebird, Operation Artichoke with his boss Gaynor. They tortured Soviet defectors. They used mind control drugs on them. This guy is one of the top guys in the pecking order at the CIA, James Walter McCord. And he works under Gaynor. Now, Gaynor will, as I said, will become a general, but he also is involved in other words, when you go into a room, like we discussed in some of the other CIA episodes, and they're going to take a Soviet defector, I guess this is his obit.
Yeah.
If you take a Soviet defector, how do you know he's a Soviet defector? because you're going to have to sit him down in a chair and basically torture the guy for months, which they did with Nosenko and others. That's what McCord was doing. McCord was involved with Gaynor in Western Europe at the time. 1961, he becomes CIA senior security officer in fucking Europe, Eric. They made this guy out to be a fucking guard of a building. Far from it. 1961, he launches an intelligence program with a guy named David Atlee Phillips called Against a Fair Play for Cuba Committee, involved with Lee Harvey Oswald. He launches their own phony Fair Play for Cuba Committee, Eric, to counteract Oswald's real one. He returns to work on a program called the Second Naval Guerrilla. That was the code name, with the guy is David Atlee Phillips. He will work with a guy named E. Howard Hunt, even though they both denied knowing each other in 1963 on this Second Naval Guerrilla Code, and which is later to become the Bay of Pigs. Before that, it was the Bay of Pigs in 1961. The counter intel programs that he's launching involve the Cubans out of Miami and getting Castro. He has a staff of 40 men, and he develops. This is incredible. He has a staff of 40, later a staff of 70. But while in Europe, he develops an X-ray machine device to find bugs inside furniture and walls. This is him. This is what James McCord. That's why he moved up the ladder. He personally invented an X-ray machine scanner, handheld scanner, to find bugs buried in furniture, and I don't mean termites, or in walls. And that's why he was considered the top man of Allen Dulles as an electronics expert and an inventor of this. The Office of Security is involved in so many different things, including the operation of Mount Weather. He was involved in a program called WISP, which is another secret program. He retires as lieutenant colonel in the Air Force Reserve, Eric, and he's involved in a special analysis unit as part of the Office of Emergency Preparedness, which involves censorship and rounding up scurrilous communists in the time of an emergency, and literally taking over the government and the elections and running the government from Mount Weather, which we could do another episode on. A lot of people know about Mount Weather, which the government would be run from if there was a nuclear war. If there's a nuclear war, there's a double of every cabinet official, including the president and the vice president, who operate legally on their behalf until those people individually or together get to Mount Weather and replace themselves. A lot of people don't know this. There is a president of the United States who plays him, and they run these war games, and they end up in Mount Weather during a time, and they could be then eventually replaced by the physical real person. But there's a double of each person in the cabinet and in the Oval Office. So anyway, McCord worked with the SRS and developed all these techniques to deal with torture, to deal with mind control drugs, to deal with Operation Artichoke, Operation Bluebird in Germany. And he comes back here and he begins to work on a program that is relatively unknown called Operation Merrimack. Like the Merrimack and the Monitor. Operation Merrimack was a illegal domestic CIA operation to infiltrate anti-war groups in the United States and to infiltrate the Black nationalist movement in the United States by the CIA. Lasted only 5 or 6 years, eventually was outed by the Rockefeller Commission, and it was snuffed out in the Church Committee hearings as well. This was because they felt that we were under attack as a nation. In other words, they brought in the CIA to help augment the FBI in this pushback against what they felt was a revolution against the United States. And you could make that argument based on what was going on with thousands of bombings by the Weather Underground and all sorts of other nefarious things that were going on. So you have an overlap of guys who were both FBI and CIA, Eric. And that's where this guy comes in as others do. I mean, Liddy comes in as a guy who is also former FBI. Hunt comes in as also former CIA. And you see that they're putting together a team. Now, the team is put together, and I'll get into this in a couple of minutes, but the team is put together because Hoover is busy and won't help them do what they want Hoover to do. The CIA doesn't want to help them do what they want to do, so they put together their own team. And because they put together their own team, they're almost like amateur ham radio operators. And the professionals in this business, i.e., the CIA and the FBI, are not happy about it. And what happens is a plan to undermine the plumbers unit and drive a stake into this amateur hour being run out of the White House. And I say amateur hour because it was amateur hour. They were literally creating their own little miniature FBI, miniature CIA, Eric. But they had no choice. I see it on both sides. Hoover wouldn't help them. The CIA wouldn't help them. You have all these situations with leaking, and it's, as I said last week or the week before, started with Ellsberg, started with the Pentagon Papers, but it goes back to Tony Ulazowitz and also Jack Caulfield, two New York City cops who they were brought on to the team early on to help with this intelligence gathering. That's Jack Caulfield. He's kind of like the Al Gonzalez of 1965. This guy was an intel cop on the New York City Police Department. Under him was a cat named Tony Ulazowitz. This is Caulfield testifying, I think, in Watergate in the hearings. But like I was saying, like when Frank Olson jumps out the window in Wormwood, which I highly recommend people who haven't seen Wormwood. I think it's on HBO, or you could buy a copy of it. It's Errol Morris, by the way, an episodic about the CIA mind control drugging of Frank Olson and others among themselves. There's Frank. Is that Frank Olson?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to keep up.
Yeah, dude, I don't know. I'm over the map today, but he will jump out the window or be thrown out the window. The point of the matter is, the guys who show up to clean up those messes is the Office of Security. The guys you see, those shadowy dudes who show up to deal with agents who go insane, even their own agents, put them into a CIA mental institution, go off the reservation, become a double agent. Now, he's working closely, McCord. In fact, people, including John Newman, who wants to come on this show, John Newman, who has worked with Oliver Stone, Professor John Newman believes that James McCord was a mole in the CIA for the Soviets. I've never heard that before, but he boldly says that McCord was a double agent. McCord. For some reason, I got we're talking about Frank McCord today, the former Dodger owner. And I keep thinking of Frank McCord, the Dodger owner.
Another double agent.
Another double agent, Frank McCord. But anyway, so he debriefs these returning U.S. airmen for us in 1969, who were shot down in a C-118 transport plane by the Soviets and exchanged in some sort of I believe, a prisoner exchange. He's the guy who debriefs them. That's also who James McCord is. This whole bumbling thing is a cover story. He becomes 1965 in July, becomes chief of their technical division. He's the man who's in charge of all of the gadgets, working with another doctor who's in charge of all the medical. He's the gadget guy. He's the guy who's not doing medical stuff with sodium pentothal acid and other drugs, but he's developing these techniques for electronically working to improve the polygraph, Eric, to get to the truth of what's going on with people who may be defectors. So he's close to Angleton, who's in charge of counterintelligence, and he's close to Dulles, and he will be super close to Richard Helms, who will become the next director of the CIA. Okay, so this organization that he's in charge of within the CIA only reports to the director, bro. He only that agent within the agency only reports to Helms. That's how inside the CIA, the Office of Security is. He's also part of this thing that I mentioned before called WISP, Wartime Information Security Program. That's the thing. There's Helms here. That's the thing that I was telling you about during a time of a nuclear war. So he's wearing multiple hats. He's wearing multiple hats. And he's brought in to this operation in the White House. It's debated as to who brought him in, but he's brought in by Liddy and brought in by Hunt to put together part of this Watergate team. But he's this plumbers unit. But his first assignments are with John Mitchell. He works for John Mitchell. He creates his own McCord and Associates. This he retires in 1970, again getting this like a recommendation up the kazoo how great he is from Richard Helms, and he begins to go to work. This is all infiltration. He begins to go to work for John Mitchell. What does he do for John Mitchell? He uses his radar device, his X-ray machine, to go into the Watergate apartment of John Mitchell and debug it every month. So John Mitchell gives him an assignment, and he says, you're going to be in charge of my wife, the drunken southern sod of a woman who can't stop picking up the phone in the middle of the night and screaming into the phone about gossip. You're going to be in charge of her security. And when he says security, he doesn't really mean bodyguard. He means stopping her from calling the New York Times in the middle of the night, stopping her from being drunk on TV, stopping her. She would go on the stump. In the election for Nixon, she was actually, this is Martha Mitchell we're talking about. There's a book called Martha that I recommend. Martha Mitchell was very effective on the stump for Nixon. And she was going across the country speaking on behalf of Nixon. However, she would get completely shit-faced and then drunk dial every reporter in Washington to give her information about her husband or Nixon or enemies of her husband or whatever she wanted to say at 3 o'clock in the morning. So they assigned James McCord to be her bodyguard in that regard. So James McCord's not going to physically do this. He brings in that guy that Eric showed in the clip. He brings in that guy, Alfred Baldwin III. Now, where does he find Alfred Baldwin III? He's in a catalog or a book called Retired FBI Agents. And this is this schlub, Alfred Baldwin III, who did a couple of years in the Bureau and resigned or retired or got fired. Look at the guy with the glasses in the background, Eric, with the Beatle haircut. Look at that guy. Look at that sketchy dude. And then John Cusack's father in back of Baldwin on the right. Anyway, so Alfred Baldwin to Martha Mitchell said he was the biggest schlub she ever met. Like, she didn't want him to be around her. He, is up in Connecticut. He gets the call from McCord, who he doesn't know, saying, how would you like a job working with the committee to reelect the president? And he goes, sure. How much is it? He goes, $20,000 a year. Now multiply that by 7, and you just go, what? Okay, how fast do I have to be there? And they go, as fast as you can get on a plane and get here. So he flies to D.C. or drives, one or the other, and he is told that he's going to be the bodyguard, and he's given a brand new .38 revolver, by the way. I don't know what that was about, but they gave him a brand new .38 revolver, which is nice. And he said he was going to be the bodyguard for Martha Mitchell. So he goes on the road with Martha Mitchell for a while, and she can't stand the guy. There's 5 other guys like him who keep rotating, guarding her, really guarding the presidency from her mouth, the mouth of the South, I think that is what they called her. But he is busy doing some other things because he is brought into this group by Hunt, who they make believe they don't know each other. Liddy doesn't know who knows anybody. Liddy brings in, he needs a wire guy, quote unquote. And Liddy is under the gun. Liddy is really the guy running this entire thing. I know that on the executive level, when we talked to Jeff Shepard, it was John Dean, and Eagle Bud Crow, and obviously Jeb Magruder is who is the assistant to the director of the committee to reelect the president. Now, keep in mind, John Mitchell is still the Attorney General of the United States, and he is now seeing these people come into his office, like we discussed with Liddy, bringing in the CIA-created poster boards of Gemstone. Here's Liddy. Liddy, to Liddy's credit, A, he never buckles. B, he hates Magruder's guts. C, he's a professional who makes a couple of mistakes, but this is Hunt here, obviously the two of them, they kind of become friends in a weird professional way, but there are fuck-ups along the way, and the fuck-ups are really partially not their fault because they're being directed by amateurs, and that is like Jeb Magruder and these others who don't know what they want, don't know when they want it, making insane demands on this group. And they're creating, this is the real key to the thing, they've created their own miniature amateur CIA. Here's Jeb Magruder, a professional douchebag, who will perjure himself and throw everyone under the bus with his testimony. Nobody liked Jeb Magruder, I'll put it that way. And Jeb Magruder and John Dean are probably the most two despised people. But Martha Mitchell, getting back to Martha Mitchell said famously that she always believed that James McCord was a double agent. And I don't know why she said that or why she kept saying it, but she had a strange relationship with James McCord. And despite being an alcoholic and a drunk, she had an incredible sixth sense for stuff that was quite real. She was able, in her sixth sense or some sort of antenna that she had, to suss out bullshit. And that's why reporters love to talk with her, because she was able to see through a lot of crap. Now, what is the crap she's trying to see through here? Jack Caulfield, the guy, the cop you showed, he brings in James McCord into this fold. Jack Caulfield was involved in Operation Sandwedge, which was the original plumbers unit. But he doesn't want to keep doing this because he realizes there's a lot of law breaking involved. Neither does Tony Ulazowitz, who was another New York City intel cop. So they turn it over to this guy, James McCord. And McCord is hired and told, what do you need? And he says, I need eavesdropping equipment. So he says, how much do you need? He goes, well, off the cuff, I need about $83,000. So $83,000, multiply that by 7, Eric, and you've got the equivalent of the amount of money that was given to him in $100 bills in sequential numbers to go buy crap. So he goes, he goes out and starts buying crap. Like if somebody what would you like to buy, Eric, if you had unlimited money? Like think in tech world. What would you buy?
Every Apple product on the market.
Right. Okay.
Whatever.
That's essentially what this guy does. He goes to different people who are used to dealing with the law enforcement or radio, buys oscilloscopes, he buys the latest radio transducers, he buys battery operated walkies, just a fortune worth of money. And it takes weeks to get this stuff because they're like some of it they're hand making from scratch. With $20,000, they're making him these bugs, to go into phones and stuff like that. I don't know if you have any footage. There might be a little bit of footage with him with the telephone in the testimony.
Yeah, I've got it.
Okay, maybe we could take a look at that.
Hold on. Sorry.
Is it capable of picking up both sides of the conversation and broadcasting it to another place?
Yes, it is.
Could you just demonstrate how you would place that in that telephone that's before you?
The cover would be taken off of the telephone, and 2 of the wires connected with this would be interconnected in series with the wiring within the phone itself. And this is the antenna, which would be concealed underneath the telephone mechanism. The device itself would be likewise concealed under some portion of the telephone mechanism. There are 3 or 4 places that it could be put.
And is that the receiver, which in fact was used by Mr. Baldwin over at the Howard Johnson's hotel?
Yes.
Okay, well, that's Sam Dash, who is a guy who's corrupted himself, because Sam Dash ends up having his name and phone number in Heidi Reichen's black book that some people believe was the goal of getting into the desk of the secretary of the office outside of Larry O'Brien's inner office. The key was held by, yeah, we could show that all day. I could look at that all day.
Well, yeah.
Yeah,
I'm doing my part.
the key was held by Martinez, and again, the Carl Schaffler, the intel cop for DC police, thought he was reaching for a gun, and it almost ended up in gunplay right there outside of Larry O'Brien's office. The outer office had the desk of the secretary that the key fit. They didn't find that out for a number of weeks until they kept sticking this key everywhere. Yeah, that's my favorite photo of her. It's either, I like that she's got her own boat, which is nice for a madam, but nevertheless, this is where this is Mo Dean's roommate, the wife of John Dean. And John Dean, according to sources, according to books, according to much of the new literature, was trying to get the photo and name of his wife out of that desk office and out of that drawer that the key that Martinez held opened. The bugs themselves, there's Modine, the bugs themselves will never be found. A lot of what McCord did was a lie, because it wasn't about the bugging. It wasn't about the break-in. It was about getting caught and busting up the plumber's unit. I'm going to tell you this right now. The entire reason that McCord and the other CIA operatives, and that includes Hunt, that includes Martinez, that includes Barker, and that specifically their leader, physical leader, James McCord, the reason they were doing this and infiltrated into the White House was to destroy the plumbers unit and the intel capabilities of the Nixon administration. It later on spiraled into the next level, but the original idea was we can't have these guys bugging the Chilean embassy, breaking into Daniel Ellsberg's secretary, doctor's office. We just can't have this. This is what we do. You know what I mean, Eric? This is, no, I mean, look at it from Helms's point of view and from Hoover's point of view and from Mark Felt. This is our job. We can't have this group of amateurs running around. So they plan to blow it up. They plan to blow up the plumbers unit, and this is how they blew up the plumbers unit, by getting caught and completely screwing up every break-in they were involved in. Keep in mind, they go 4 times into the Watergate. I mean, the fact is that James McCord had been in the Watergate so many times with Mitchell that the security guards knew him by his first name. When he's talking to the security guards on that floor, it's because he knows them, because he's been working with John Mitchell for months and months, going in and out of that apartment. He drove John Mitchell's daughter to school every day. That's how many times he was in the Watergate way before this. He knew that building. Yeah, he knew that building inside and out. He worked for the Mitchells. That's why he was able to go in and out of this building. He taped 8 doors open, 8, because he had a friend, the guy we discussed, Lou, what's his face, the private eye. I mean, he had a picture of him there for a second a couple of weeks ago. I forget the guy's last name. He worked for both Bud Fensterwald, and he also worked for James McCord. His name was Lou Russell. He's an old drunk, and he was the private eye to go to. He was this is Lou Russell. The doors were left open for Lou Russell to go in and out of the Watergate during the break-ins. They were intending to blow up this plumber's unit and destroy it and have it taken down. That was the assignment for these guys. They were reporting, including Hunt, back and forth to CIA, to Richard Helms for weeks before the break-in of the Watergate. All of this stuff, they were allowing Hunt to go in there and get disguises. They were bringing in Liddy. It was all designed to destroy the plumbers unit. And eventually, people like James McCord were to the far right of Nixon. There were people all the way to the right of Nixon, part of a group called the American Security Council, Eric. The American Security Council was an ultra-conservative group of what later became neocons today. But the original group goes back to the House on American Activities Committee hearings and finding communists within the State Department and working with Joe McCarthy. This group was part of what McCord's world was like. And this guy, Lee Pennington, who you showed, was one of the bigwigs at the American Security Council and was the mentor of James McCord. James McCord was involved in so much stuff, it's hard to even explain it at this time, because a lot of it has been covered up over the years. But when McCord is arrested, a guy shows up who is the Al Gonzalez of DC police, and his name is Bittenberg or something. He was a cop who knew McCord because McCord interfaced as part of the CIA with the DC intel cops, and they knew him from that intel. And he goes and visits McCord in jail in the DC prison where the January 6 people are being held today. And this was a complete hellhole back then. He ends up as a cellmate with Liddy at one point, which is really funny. Him and McCord sharing a cell in the DC jail, which was absolutely barbaric in 1972, let alone 2020. Anyway, so in that cell, this cop comes in, and he is a DC intel cop. And the DC intel cop is told by, this is the night they're arrested for the break-in. He's told by McCord, don't worry, this is a CIA operation, it's a CIA burglary. He will later testify that that's what McCord told him that night. McCord will vigorously and vehemently deny it, because what happens is his own lawyer, this guy, Gerald Alk, I don't know if you have a picture of him, he is the lawyer for McCord before their assigned CIA lawyer shows up. This happens in every single case going back to the Mansons. This is, maybe you got some video on this guy?
Yeah,
or?
got video of him.
Go ahead.
What I said to the judge was that I would rest my defense on a theory of law known as duress, which generally speaking means that if one is in reasonable apprehension, regardless of whether or not this apprehension is in fact correct, of imminent bodily harm to others, he can technically break a law in order to avoid the greater harm. By my questions to the government witness, Mr. Gregory, I was attempting to bring out that type of related activity as it pertained to the McGovern headquarters.
Well, how could gathering intelligence in McGovern headquarters help avoid these perils that Mr. McCord may have foreseen to the Republican campaign?
Hypothetically speaking, let's suppose that a call was received at McGovern headquarters from any of these groups which have participated in these violent demonstrations to the effect that they were coming into the Capitol with 3,000 or 4,000 members of their groups on a given date. This would certainly alert the security forces as to when and where this potential violence might occur.
It's an interesting
Right.
theory of law.
Go ahead. Yeah, no. Okay, this idea came from James McCord himself to his lawyer, Gerald Alk. Now, because Gerald Alk will be fired, he was working with F. Lee Bailey out of Massachusetts. He originally hires F. Lee Bailey because he doesn't want a D.C. attorney. So Alk and Bailey say, look, it's obvious, this is the CIA's problem. You all work for the CIA. This is a CIA operation. Well, McCord goes berserk because the last thing they want is having this traced to the CIA. He's he's sending letters to Richard Helms and to Pennington and to Paul Gaynor, his boss, General Paul Gaynor, all through the Watergate arrest and up until his trial, that he cannot have them connected to the CIA. That's what his goal is. And Gerald Alk and him say, well, okay, what if you're the guy who is just hired by the CIA or the government? It's a defense where you're just a guy following orders. You don't know anything. And this is what McCord comes up with. But Alk wants to put the CIA in the limelight and say, look, this is all CIA guys. This is anyway. He fires that guy and he hires Bud Fensterwald. And Bud Fensterwald, and people in the conspiracy world know who he is. He is a guy who you believe. There's Fensterwald there. This is a guy who you believe he started
Bernstein.
What's with
right.
yeah, there's Bernstein there on the right. Okay, McCord claims that Woodward and Bernstein were not the guys who originally got the story. There's a guy named Robert Jackson out of the LA Times that McCord was feeding the entire story to from day one on the phone. And this guy beat Woodward and Bernstein to the punch with all of these factual stories before Woodward and Bernstein ever got there. And McCord said this guy Jackson, who was a friend of his, never really got credit for it. But Fensterwald comes in, and Fensterwald is a deep state scurrilous cat. He's known to start an organization called COPA, Eric, the Committee Against Political Assassinations. He defended James Earl Ray in the assassination of Martin Luther King. Fensterwald is very famous and very shady, and he is assigned, there he is, he's assigned to be the new attorney for the deep state of James McCord. He comes into this situation now, and Gerald Alk, the guy who wanted to put the CIA on trial, is out. So what happens at McCord's house? McCord calls his wife and says, I've been arrested, burn every single document in the house. And she goes, what? He goes, yeah, there's a guy coming over named Pennington. So remember Pennington? He's now 76 years old. He shows up at James McCord's house in Virginia, and with his wife, James McCord's wife, and his secretary, the two secretaries, I can't explain this, so I'll tell you straight up. The secretary of Pennington, show you how close Pennington is to McCord. The secretary of Pennington shows up, and the secretary of McCord shows up. Why? They're married to each other. Oh, they're so close that their secretaries married each other. Pennington had a male secretary. Anyway, so the two, they're all burning every single document in McCord's house. Now, what happens? They don't open up the flue in the chimney, so the smoke fills up the entire house and destroys it. It doesn't burn it down, but all the damage from the smoke damage destroys his house, and it has to be repainted and redone and refurnished and everything else. But the point of the matter is Pennington is there with the secretaries and his wife burning every CIA document in that house. And Pennington shows up, and he's part of the CIA and the FBI. He's one of these guys like McCord who does both, who's loaned out to the other one, got paid by both CIA and the FBI.
George Hunter White, too. There's another one of those.
Who was that?
George Hunter White. He was FBI and then got pulled over to the CIA to do work for Gottlieb, Operation Midnight Climax.
Oh, okay. Well, the situation is that there's a couple of these guys who are on both sides, and that allows them, the reason it allows them to do domestic work, and that's why they kept retiring. That's why Hunt retired 4 times. That's why McCord retired, so he could do domestic work and still be legal. They're still ostensibly simply working for their old bosses. You know, so he, like I said, he now is in jail. He raises the bail and you know, gets out. And what does he do when he gets out, McCord? Well, he's got to go to a payphone and answer a phone. McCord answers the phone, and it's his old buddy Jack Caulfield, who's operating on behalf of Dean and Magruder, telling him to shut the F up. We're going to take care of you if you shut up and don't say anything. It's
Caulfield.
Oh, Caulfield. Okay. So Caulfield, it's just a whole series of spy things of going to meet him at these different payphones, in other words. So Caulfield is telling him that if you keep your trap shut, plead guilty, we will take care of you and you will have clemency in prison within 10 to 11 months, Eric. And he doesn't have the confidence, McCord, that this is how far up the ladder this is. Look at it from McCord's point of view. If you plead guilty to this and they drop you like a hot potato, I mean, you're stuck in prison. I mean, you know what I mean? Like, so he keeps asking him, how far up the ladder does this go? In a series of late night phone calls and meetings on the George Washington overpass or some highway over there, the George Washington Parkway, actually, January 14th, 1972. He says you're going to get executive clemency. We're going to take care of your family while you're in prison. We're going to set you up with a job the second you get out. We're going to give you government lawyers so you don't have any legal expenses. Bizarrely enough, he's got money left over from his shopping spree, and he uses like $12,000 of it to hire F. Lee Bailey, which is one of the highest paid attorneys in the world. So he's using actually their money for his own defense, which is kind of interesting because as Jeff pointed out, what they were calling legal defenses, the other side was calling it as bribery and blackmail to shut them up with money. But the money was being used for legal defenses, and it's kind of a gray area legally whether you could pay the legal defenses of whoever you want. You know what I mean? Even if you're involved in the case, Eric, it's kind of a weird, sketchy thing. But look at it from the Nixon administration. They get, this is F. Lee Bailey. I don't know who that is on the right, some client or something. But look at it from the Nixon administration. They already busted out the Mora Radford spy ring. That was part of the spy ring that they caught them stealing Kissinger's documents and giving them to the Joint Chiefs of Staff's office. Okay, so Nixon tells Mora, the head of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, there's this douchebag, that, look, I'm on to you. I can't go public. It'll destroy the entire Joint Chiefs of Staff, you piece of shit. Nixon confronts him about this. But there's also another spy ring, and it's one by Admiral Elmo Zumwalt, who will place his naval lieutenant, David Halpern, also within the Kissinger office. And David Halpern is a lieutenant, a naval lieutenant on Kissinger's staff. He is his note taker. He is another spy who is reporting directly to the Navy with Admiral Elmo Zumwalt, one of the biggest naval people in naval history in the United States. Okay, well, who is this guy you're saying, David Halpern? David Halpern's father was a guy named Mort Halpern. Mort Halpern was a far left liberal who actually was the writer of the Pentagon Papers, Eric, along with Leslie Gelb. These were people who had violated national security by creating this Pentagon Papers and writing it and then having Ellsberg distribute it. So the father of this spy is also a far-left communist named Morton Halpern. Now he has another son. The other son is Mark Halpern, who will end up being on MSNBC with Morning Joe with John Heilman for many years, doing political analysis. Mark Halpern will later be on PBS with his circus show. He'll later have a show on Showtime. This guy is considered to be one of the highest paid journalists in American history, Mark Halpern. He will later be famously fired for a Me Too sexual scandal, taken down because he's not hard enough on Donald Trump. This thing goes full circle, boys. We're back here in 2024. Mark Halpern is now the leading political analyst on Newsmax. And that's how this circle goes around from Nick. There's Mark Halpern. And he's good. He's really good. He's so good. He's got so many sources. It goes all the way back to his brother being a spy and his father being a leftist communist writing the Pentagon Papers. That's why we're doing this series, is because of the connection between Nixon and Trump today. And I don't mean personally those two guys. I'm talking about the entire universe of this world between the two of them, and how the Nixon people felt they were under attack, and how they had Nixon had picked people like General Haig, like Trump picked people who were generals that were the wrong guys. Nixon did the same thing because they revered the military and respected those medals, Eric, as you can attest to. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Like both Trump and Nixon, had reverence for the military. You don't think there's gonna be a guy when you tell him to pull the troops out of Syria, he's gonna say, I did it, and never did it. Yet that's what we're up against, which is one of the many reasons we're doing this series. But the situation becomes that they're telling McCord not to blow, and they're keeping the lid on every single person, and they plan to give clemency to these people. Now, they know it's a frame job. Everyone on both sides of this thing knows what they're trying to do here. They're trying to take down the Nixon administration that had won by such a massive landslide. But it's much deeper than that. They're trying to take down the fundraisers. They're trying to take down the money people like Robert Vesco. They're trying to intimidate anybody who would ever be a Republican donor again. Sounds familiar, people? The situation is very, very similar to the past couple of years here. They are trying to dismantle the entire Republican hierarchy of the Republican Party in 1972. Why? Because Ted Kennedy is running this operation because he can't run for president because he killed a woman in a car, which we covered in Chappaquiddick. So this is what he's doing behind the scenes. We've got Richard Helms in the CIA. It'll lead to the demise of Richard Helms career-wise. And McCord says that there will be a scorched earth in the forest. I forget his phraseology, this draconian end of American government if Richard Helms is removed. And he believes that this is going to take down the entire Nixon administration, McCord famously says, and it does. He is involved in part of that, but my guess is they just wanted to take down the plumbers unit. They wanted them out of this intelligence business that they were running. I believe it spiraled out of control. I believe that other people saw blood in the water, Eric, and were able to go for the gusto and take down the whole Nixon administration. But I don't believe that was McCord's original idea. And I don't believe it was the CIA's original idea, because they could have planted something on Nixon or done something some other way. This was a long, drawn-out process that would prevent the Republicans from getting back in power, they hoped, for decade after decade after decade. But getting back to McCord, he now has to decide whether he's going to cooperate, and are they bluffing? Is Nixon really the one who's offering this? Now, keep in mind, from the Nixon side, you're now giving him information that makes him very powerful, Eric, that being James McCord. Because if you're telling him that Nixon and the upper echelon of the Nixon White House are willing to suborn perjury, are willing to bribe you, are willing to give you clemency, they're literally putting themselves in a very, very difficult position, Eric.
Yeah, they are.
You know what I mean? So, and it's a bluff game. They're both, feeling each other out. The others have taken the money. The others are willing to do it. Liddy's going to go down. Hunt's going to go down. They buy in. The guy who's holding out is James McCord. And they are ripping their hair out over James fucking McCord. They don't know what to do about him. And they know that he's a loose cannon, and they know he's working for the CIA. And they just keep putting pressure on him to say that he's not going to blow.
Wow.
So anyway, dig this. So it's just about time for his trial. And McCord decides to write a letter. And he writes a letter. Let me see if I can find the letter here, because the letter is written to a guy who may be mentally unstable, by the way. Let me see if I can find this letter here, which I was just
on
reading.
The screen.
Yeah, I'm going to just read a little part of it to Judge Sirica. For our people at home, Judge Sirica, this is March 19, 1973. Certain questions have been posed to me from your honor through the probation officer. He wanted to give this letter to Judge Sirica. Sirica said, "Go. I can't take it. I'm a judge. You got to give it to the probation officer." Dealing with details of the case, motivations, intent, and mitigating circumstances. In endeavoring to respond to these questions, I am whipsawed in a variety of legalities. First, I may be called before the Senate committee. Secondly, I may be involved in a civil suit, blah, blah, blah. At the bottom, he says, be that as it may, in the interest of justice and in the interest of restoring faith in the criminal justice system, which faith has been severely damaged in this case, I will state the following to you at this time, which I hope may be of help to you in meting out justice in this case. One, there was political pressure applied to the defendants to plead guilty and remain silent, which we just discussed. Two, perjury occurring during the trial in matters highly material to the very structure, orientation, and impact of the government's case and to the motivation and intent of the defendants. Three, others involved in the Watergate operation were not identified during the trial when they could have been for those testifying. Four, the Watergate operation is not a CIA operation. The Cubans may have been misled by others into believing that it was a CIA operation. I know for a fact that it was not. Number five, some statements were unfortunately made by witnesses or a witness, which left the court with the impression that they're stating untruths or withholding facts of knowledge when in fact only honest errors of memory were involved. Six, my motivations were different than those of the others involved, but were not limited to or simply those offered in my defense during the trial. This is no fault of my attorneys, but of the circumstances under which we had to prepare. I give this statement freely and voluntarily, James W McCord. So McCord gives this letter. They're about to be sentenced. The people who they're convicted in the trial of the Watergate burglars, they're about to be sentenced. McCord, at the last minute, gives him this letter, and it blows the case sky mother effing high. Reporters go absolutely batshit crazy. He reads the letter in open court. This is what Sirica has been waiting for. Sirica is been acting as a prosecutor in the case. This alters the entire fabric of the case. And then McCord will then go over to the Senate and testify freely in the Senate as to what he believes. A lot of it hearsay. In fact, if you have any of his Senate testimony before the Watergate committee, I don't know if you have a segment of it or not, which may be from C-SPAN, Eric, or there was a little bit that we had, or maybe not.
We had Baldwin and McCord,
okay.
that little segment, but
okay. He will talk about stuff that he believes. In other words, he believes that this came from the office of John Mitchell, and they don't care about that. They said, well, this is from Haldeman. He was running. They don't care about that. But all of a sudden, in his testimony, he says, yeah, this was put together, and what the main operative was John Dean. And they go, whoa. What did you say? And he says, John Dean. He goes, well, that's hearsay. They stopped the entire process. They go, yeah, you can't say John Dean. And he's going, why? I said Mitchell. I said Haldeman. He didn't say anything then. Well, that's hearsay because they're trying to create this witness, John Dean, and they don't want him besmirched. So they literally, you should hear what Sam Irvin, he just, well, boy, you can't call him. That's just hearsay. Now, come on now, and he stops the whole thing. Anyway, so everything he's got is hearsay because the only thing McCord knows is what Hunt and Liddy told him. He doesn't know who's running this thing. He has no firsthand knowledge of this. Anyway, he begins to show them. It becomes a show and tell with those phones and everything else. The point of the matter is he never put any of those bugs in there. He was bugging something else somewhere else. He was into the Howard Johnsons the week before they even went in there and started using Baldwin without tape recorders. And Liddy said to him, what the hell is wrong with you? Why don't you use a tape recorder? And he says, well, I can't get it to interface with the transceiver. And he goes, well, use a microphone. I don't give a shit. And and Liddy smells a rat. And Liddy will later say, I believe McCord was a double agent. In his own book, in the second version of the book, he will say that Liddy that he believed that McCord was a double agent because nobody could be this stupid, according to
theme.
What's that?
Common theme with McCord.
Yeah, it's a common theme, and he's got such a resume and such incredible background in electronics. he shows Liddy. Liddy comes over and he shows him the oscilloscope, and he shows him the frequencies and how they literally have to be aligned to the 10th, like 39.011 gigahertz. Otherwise, you can't get the exact bugging frequency in real time. And he's showing Liddy how fine-tuned the oscilloscope is with the frequencies. And Liddy's kind of impressed by all that because it's real, because it's quite real. But later on, he will show his hand by acting and saying stupid shit that Liddy finally blows his stack and says, what the hell is wrong with you? Just get a microphone and tape record this. He's got Baldwin sitting there with headphones, listening to conversations and writing it down by hand, Eric, on yellow pads. Think about that. The idea that Baldwin is the only guy covering the eavesdropping on the DNC. He's doing it by hand with yellow legal pads instead of tape recording the entire affair. And who knows what's on there? Only Alfred Baldwin. One man knows what he listened to. And Liddy blows his stack again because Baldwin is a plant. He's a Democratic operative. Dude, the whole thing is a setup. And it's got multiple parts to it of who's setting up what. Look at this schlub. What do I know? I just went in. He when they're caught, he tells Liddy that night at the Watergate. He says, what do you want me to do? He says, get the equipment into the van and get the F out of here. He goes, well, where do you want me to go? He says, I don't give a shit where you go. Just get out of the goddamn hotel with the equipment. So he puts it in the van, and where does he drive? He drives right to Hunt's house. And he goes, here's your equipment. He goes, what? And Hunt's wife's there. She goes, I don't know anything about this. And he says, can you give me a ride back to Connecticut? And he goes, what? Anyway, they did every single thing they could to make sure they got caught. But they think about the theatrics of it. You got to make it look real, Eric. You can't just be that stupid, where it's that brazen. You got to walk this thin line. And it is kind of a thin line of what they're doing. Yet they were able to take it all the way. Now, the sentences by Sirica, 45 years, and Liddy and Hunt and these guys, Liddy was laughing. Liddy says in his book, when he was sentenced to 20 years in prison, you're up for parole in 6.5. He said the media got it wrong. He was sentenced to flat 20 years in prison, not 6 to 20. He said they got that wrong. And he said, I was glad he sentenced me to 20 because on appeals, he will look like the biggest psycho on the DC bench for doing it. That's why Liddy was laughing at his sentence. The others were weeping. I mean, the thing with Hunt, his wife was dead. He didn't have any money. He throws himself on the mercy of the court and says, Your Honor, my kids don't have a mother. Now you're going to take away their father. I've got 3 kids. I have no money. My name is ruined. I'm asking for some mercy. So Sirica says, yeah, 45 years in prison. Nice. Have a nice day. 45 freaking years, right? For a burglary, as Hunt says, they've got no criminal record. The burglary fails. They don't steal anything. They've all been disbarred or whatever they've had happen to them. And Sirica says, yeah, 45 years. That sounds fair. Anyway, so he's a broken man, Hunt. But what happens is the guy who serves the shortest amount of time, 1 to 4 months, James McCord. Dean will serve no time. He'll be sentenced from 1 to 4 years. John Dean will serve zero days in jail. John Dean, the mastermind of the entire thing. Liddy will do the most, obviously, and will be pardoned by Jimmy Carter, which people forget that Liddy was pardoned by Jimmy Carter. Hunt, the novelist, obviously he gets money out of his wife's death, which we're going to explore in a separate episode on the death of Dorothy Hunt, which is, there's been a lot of plain shenanigans lately. So we're going to have to look into Dorothy Hunt's situation. But they want to take down John Mitchell. They want Bob Haldeman, and they want Nixon. And the road to that is John Dean changing his story every week as he meets with another prosecutor. and trying to put together a timeline that will lead them to Nixon. And as Jeff Shepard has pointed out, and we'll bring back Jeff at some point to talk about, James Rosen said he would come. We're going to bring on James Rosen to talk about John Mitchell, because I started to read, and I told him I'll finish his book, and he's got another book coming out on Scalia Part 2. And he says when he's done with Scalia, he'll come on the show and talk about John Mitchell, his previous book, so we could get Mitchell, the perspective on John Mitchell. There's a lot about McCord in the Mitchell book, because McCord is part of the family as the security guy for the Mitchell family. Like I said, he's literally driving their daughter to school every morning. That's where this guy is. And he's also, I believe, wiretapping the phones of John Mitchell. And he's also, not that they're framing these guys, but they're keeping their paymasters abreast of what's going on. And that's half the battle. In other words, McCord comes into the White House via a Secret Service agent named Wong, W-O-N-G, an Asian Secret Service agent. And they needed some help from CIA. And this is an old ploy where they loan out, like we were talking about, they loan out people to other agencies in the government. We saw that in Butler. Department of Homeland Security loans out people to be with Secret Service. So it's a trap in a way, because it looks legal on paper. But the way the CIA got into the Nixon White House is worthy of discussion, because McCord gets in via this guy Wong from the Secret Service, who says, we need help at the Secret Service. Can you send us an agent? Okay. Then Hunt gets in through his route. Barker gets in through his route. Martinez gets in through his route. And voila, all of a sudden you've got a crew of Secret Service, of CIA agents within the White House. Now, they have to be former agents, obviously, for domestic purpose. So what do? They retire. Okay, great. Here's your thing on his wall. Frank McCord said, to distinguished service, he got a Distinguished Service Award for Outstanding Service, 1970, signed Richard Helms, for your outstanding duty that you did.
Alfred Wong.
Which is that?
Alfred Wong, the Secret Service agent.
On the right or the left? And the left?
I think it's right. I'm not sure.
He's obviously Asian, so I mean that guy looks Asian. So Wong is obviously a deep state operative in the Secret Service, and nobody knows about this guy historically, but he opens the door to James McCord to get in. Others get in through other ways. Like I said, Caulfield and Ulazowitz will bring them in through different ways. But these guys creating their own plumbers unit is what led to the destruction of the plumbers unit by the outside agencies. That's what drove them incredibly insane. But that being said, Bob Haldeman did ask Richard Helms for help, and he told him to go fuck himself. They did ask, when he was still alive, J. Edgar Hoover for help. And Hoover told him, go F yourself. I'm not going to do it. So, look at it from the Nixon point of view. They've got wiretaps on things. They've got people leaking stuff. They've got these two spy rings, Zumwalt and the other one, General Mora. They've caught two spy rings. What are they supposed to do?
That's Zumwalt, by the way.
Yeah, he was quite the character. By the way, McCord's secret undercover name was Ed Martin. I always liked that. It was just this generic name that he used, Ed Martin. But anyway, there's a lot of characters involved in this story. And McCord will later come out of this kind of unscathed. He will start teaching Sunday school at a church. He gets spiritual. He becomes like this deeply religious guy. Some people say he went off his rocker and he went nuts. I don't know if that's true. They said when he quit the Secret Service, when he quit the CIA, they gave him a final report of mental stability, and they said he had imagination, ingenuity, drive, very principled, but he had also in the report an innate stubbornness that could lead to problems working for authority figures. So it kind of made sense. I mean, it kind of fit.
That's kind of what they look for in a CIA officer in some ways. Not necessarily going against orders, but they need people who are creative, can think on their feet, etc. But like when I interviewed Jack Barsky, who was a KGB mole, he said that they had a 10-year lifespan on moles because they needed them to be independent-minded. But that same independent mind meant that they were going to go off the reservation after about 10 years. It was actually built into the program.
He ran a CIA cutout while he was at the CIA called Anderson Enterprises, which was an electronics eavesdropping cutout company that he ran, not unlike the Mullen Company, where Hunt worked as in a PR company called Mullen. Robert Mullen was deep CIA, and the Mullen Company was a cutout. That's how Hunt gets involved in the plumbers unit, through Mullen. But yeah, they have all these different cutout companies that they're running or being involved in. But oddly enough, I mean, during the break-in, McCord kept disappearing all the time. During all 4 break-ins, he disappeared. And I think it involved letting Lou get into the buildings wherever he was. But for instance, they ordered these 7 banquet dinners for their phony banquet in the Watergate, which was their cover story. He didn't even show up for his dinner, so they ate his dinner and drank his liquor. They said, fuck him, he's not here, who cares? He kept disappearing and going and doing stuff, and Liddy noticed it a lot. It really bugged Liddy. Just kept saying, where the fuck is McCord? Where does he keep going? Is he taking a dump? Is he taking a leak? Where is this guy? And they would find him, like Martinez found him on the 7th floor talking to the security guards, and Martinez freaked out. He didn't know whether to approach him, not approach him, what to say. But like I said, he lived in there. He knew the guards. They all lived in the same building. People on the Republicans had so many apartments there. They called the Watergate was nicknamed the Republican Bastille. There was so many condos owned by Republican bigwigs that it was considered a Republican stronghold as an apartment building, you know. But I mean, what a weird group of physical offices and buildings and everything else. And who's in charge of the security there? James McCord. So it's just really, really interesting how he has been completely disappeared. Like when Diogenio finds out he's dead, he's been dead for 2 years. And there's like a write-up in Politico referencing Diogenio's website, which I recommend, Kennedy and King. Also recommend the new book. It's relatively new, by our friend of the channel, Shane O'Sullivan, out of Ireland, who's written a very good book called The Watergate Burglars, Nixon Dirty Tricks in the CIA. There's also some other books that have recently come out. But there's this great one by a guy called Undercover Memoirs of an American Secret Agent by Howard Hunt, that has Hunt's take on the whole thing. The problem with researching this is that every memoir has its own take on the other memoirs. Like, he calls McCord a liar, for certain things, and they call each other liars. So you really have to read them all and find the overlaps of truth to cut out the bullshit stories. Everybody's, talking about Magruder. McCord, to his credit, just keeps saying Magruder is getting away with perjury. He is saving his own ass. And he's right. Magruder, I mean, depending on who your lawyer is, Hunt ends up with Bittman, and Bittman is a Democratic bigwig lawyer who throws him under the bus. I mean, it's amazing how the lawyers that they have are operatives who will destroy them, and they don't even realize it. But that's part of the game, I guess.
Hey, another dude died, and it took 2 years to find out as well.
Yeah, Baldwin. I said that the other night, that I was surprised to find that. Another guy, there is no reason to bring these guys up historically. They want them deep sixed historically. They don't want, and this is, you could even look at Bob Woodward. He has fought tooth and nail to stop these books from being published. He has gone to publishers and threatened them if they publish these books that undermine his narrative working for the deep state. And a lot of the publishers have taken it seriously and not published books because of the amount of pressure from people like Bob Woodward, who also was considered to be to the right of Richard Nixon. I know that people find that hard to believe, but Nixon was kind of stuck in the middle politically, Eric, in terms of
right. And
what's that?
A lot of left-wing agenda happened under Nixon.
Right. What I'm saying is he had enemies on both sides of the political spectrum, which is rare, that you have both sides squeezing you. He's being squeezed from which people don't acknowledge because they consider him to be far right. But Goldwater and these guys hated his policies and wanted him out. You very rarely have that. The reason I'm doing this is because you now, for the past 4 or 5 years, seen it with Trump, where both sides are squeezed. That's right. That's why we do this, because it's very similar to Trump. Again, when I say Trump and Nixon, I don't mean personalities. They're obviously radically different guys. One is completely outgoing and gregarious, the other introverted and shy. Not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about political, where they are in the political climate, where they are in the political barometer, what they try to achieve, foreign policy, domestically. Very similar, but the personalities are not. But the situations are coming around to repeat themselves. So, like I said, McCord has offered all this stuff. Caulfield is just a mouthpiece. It literally is coming from Haldeman and eventually from, and also from Dean to try to keep this guy in line. But the Sirica letter is now famous for blowing up the entire Watergate narrative. Whether it's true or not, I don't know. But this is what blew it up. And, he's a stubborn guy, but it's weird because he has financial problems. He turns down a book deal with Harcourt Brace. There was $115,000 in cash, refuses to take the book, writes a book on his own, like self-publishing it, and turns down a movie deal. This being James McCord, who claimed to have financial problems because of all this. Maybe he kept all that money for the electronics equipment. Who knows? But he could barely raise money to get out of jail. He had to get like 10 family members to throw down, 5 or 10 grand a piece to bail him out. Turned down a ton of money for a normal book like everyone else got, and a movie deal. What's that? Yeah, I know. In fact, he says in letters to Richard Helms, my loyalty lies with the agency. He literally says that. And he is an agency man till the end of his life. He dies as an agency man. And look, I mean, whatever you want to say about Liddy, Liddy wasn't an agency man. He didn't give a fuck about the FBI. He hated Hoover's guts. He wasn't CIA. He was just a principled guy who may have been a little nutty. But so was Sirica. I mean, when we do the Sirica episode, you're going to see that this guy was deranged. And McCord was a little bit off his rocker, I think. But I'm curious to see what John Newman says about him being a mole, because that would be really interesting if this guy was really a mole. He looks a little crazy.
Yeah, I mean, I think they attract each other.
Yeah.
It's a bunch of characters for sure.
Yeah. Well, I mean, his track record of going all the way back to Germany and the Soviets, of monitoring them on the radio, Eric. I mean, this guy has a long history of anti-communist, anti-spy behavior, including being part of that organization with the drug use and Bluebird and Artichoke and everything else. I mean, he was the guy in the German fort utilizing these tools physically. Gottlieb may have invented them, but they had to have agents of this group to implement the Gottlieb drug program.
Yeah, for sure. You have to have the field guys who are actually applying.
He's a field guy. But I'm saying that they were inside the field. This was not a domestic spy. That's not what this guy did. This was an internal CIA operative. The closest thing I could think of is internal affairs, in terms of inside the police force on steroids, because they were able to do so many things so secretly at the bidding of the director himself, director of operations, that is Richard Helms.
Yeah, I've interviewed a CIA security guy. It's
Okay.
like their third wing, and they literally provide all security, et cetera, for
Yeah.
the officers who are
Yes,
doing
yes.
the work. So they're kind of
But there's
stealthily in
much
the
more. That's what
background.
I thought. That's what I thought. But there's much more to it. I didn't know that they did all this other stuff. I thought that too. But they make it clear, the people who are writing the new books, they make it clear that there's a lot more to that division than the public has ever been led on to know about the Office of Security. I was eye-opening for me. It was eye-opening for me.
Well, it's like the Gestapo's Gestapo.
Yeah, good one. Yeah. I mean, I don't know what the FBI has. Maybe they have their own thing too, but that was a much more top-heavy program. You know, at some point he runs a program called Operation MH Bound, where he gets a staff of 70 working for him. You know, why October 1968? I mean, this is infiltration and wiretapping of leftists in the United States and overseas to prevent a revolution in the United States and overseas, which they believe is a communist-inspired revolution, which I don't disagree with. You know, did they break laws? Apparently, you know, but what are you supposed to do when you're in the middle of a revolution? I don't know what the answer is to that, but we're finding out right now.
That's for sure. Well,
All right. Well, that's what I've got on James Walter McCord, Eric.
Quite a bit.
Maybe
there.
you could pull up a couple of super chats while I just go off camera for 1 second.
All right. Well, I'm going to start off with the membership. Actually, I'll go back to that. Got a new member with Randy Woodspinner. Thank you very much. Happy to see you. Always happy to see new members. Dr. Claw, MAD, also has become a new YouTube member. So thank you very, very much. 556 Pew Pew said the best show on YouTube. Thanks, guys. And Pew Pew has not only been a member for 2 months, but has been incredibly generous, as you will be seeing here in a moment, in gifting memberships to a lot of other people. And we thank him profusely for that kind of generosity. As you can see here, Pew Pew gifted 10 America's Untold Stories memberships. And this is
a guy from Denmark, Eric, or
Norway, I think.
Norway.
And yet another 10. So Pew Pew's on the case today, giving 20 memberships overall. And we deeply, deeply appreciate that. It really does make a difference. We're still fighting demonetization every freaking time, and it's just frustrating. Jay Kidd with a $2 super sticker. Thank you very much. Linda Lee. Love American Untold Stories. Thank you for all your time and effort. Yeah, Mark's been at this one for a while. We couldn't even really get to it because there's just so much books on McCord.
There's so much stuff on McCord that I didn't want to sell it short. Now, that being said, like Eric and I have figured out, whether you like it or not, we're going to try to alternate Tuesdays to cover current events, which covers 2 areas that we need, because there's so much current events right now that we thought that would be helpful, like another extra Freeform Friday on Tuesdays, and then cover the Watergate people on alternate Tuesdays. Am I getting this correct?
Right, at least through the election.
Yeah. And because it's just,
we might do other stuff like, Lenny Bruce or, other things mixed in there. Again.
It's taken me a long time to do the research on these guys because there's so many books. I can't turn it around in a week. So it helps me to have the 2 weeks, and it helps, I think, for us to cover the news. So I think it makes kind of sense to alternate Tuesdays and we'll keep Freeform Friday the way it is, right, Eric?
Yes, of course. Freeform Friday, literally that. And another thing that might alternate is like if there's an interview with somebody available, that would be on a Tuesday. If it's a long form interview, like Jeff coming back to talk about Judge Sirica.
Well, how about this guy Kennedy? What about RFK Jr.?
I don't know. Yeah, talk to his publicist or whatever.
I am trying. I really am trying. I thought showing up in the first row of his press conference would send a statement, but apparently not. I can't
invite Amaryllis on.
Or she was right next to me glaring at me. Maybe she'll come on. I think it's a conspiracy of silence.
Maybe send out an invite to her.
I'll send it out to Fox. I mean, I think she was referring to the episode at one time as being the work of crackpots. The Amaryllis Fox episode, which
We should be proud.
I am proud. I am putting it in the crackpot section. I don't know what part she denies, but Al Gonzalez explained to me that she couldn't have gone through the Holland Tunnel as she claimed on 9/12, the day after 9/11, even though she claims that in her book. So either Al Gonzalez is right or she's right. I'm going to go with Al Gonzalez on that one, a guy who was at Ground Zero the day after 9/11.
Oh, he was waiting for her there. Adam Kahn, tomorrow equals the anniversary of the 1948 U.S. Senate race in Texas.
Oh, that's interesting. You know what? I mean, you got to tip your hat to LBJ for pulling that off. I mean, I wish the Republicans would get some balls to do something like that. Like all I've been saying is, if you take Pennsylvania or you take Arizona, and you take these registrars who tally the votes county-wise, and you just don't turn them in until the city is done. Is that too much to ask? Apparently. That they wait to the final tally of Philadelphia. You wait for the final tally of Phoenix. I don't care what you do. The phone's going to ring. There's going to be pressure on these people who and I'm going to call every single county registrar in Arizona, by the way, and Pennsylvania. I'm going to find their numbers. I'm going to call every single one of them, and I'm going to explain to them what they have to do. And they can tell me to go fuck myself or whatever you want to do, but I'm just going to plant that seed that all you have to do is tally your votes, whether it's 18,350, and just sit on it. You have your tally, go eat dinner, and don't turn it in. I know the phone's going to ring. I know there's going to be a lot of pressure, but you're just going to have to weather the storm and not turn it in, bro.
Turn your phone off. Get back to
that's what the guy, that super chat was about, of somebody that had the balls to not turn in the votes so you could get the final number to top it, which is what they want to do in Phoenix and what they want to do in Philadelphia and what they want to do in Minneapolis. They just wait for the rural county honest registrars to turn in their tallies like good little soldiers so they could top them by the morning.
Yeah, they are. All right. Sean Lucan with $10. Thank you very much. Pamela Clifton. I don't mean to pop a balloon, but now that I'm following President Trump's campaign, I got a text where he says he's being indicted again by Jack Smith. Yes, we're going to cover that Friday.
Yeah, on Friday. We'll talk about it on Friday.
Yeah.
I mean, it sounds like double jeopardy. I mean, what, you just get indicted by the same guy for the same crime a week later?
And he changed the charges.
Right, I know, but when is it?
them.
You have to physically arrest Jack Smith. What is the problem here? There's people talking about making citizens arrest at these points, and doing something physical where you say, I'm arresting you and turning you over to authorities in my county.
Well, I am waiting for Jack Smith to go to prison like Michael Cohen and Avenatti. It's like these lawyers seem to be are so scurrilous. It's like ultimately they go down. So Jack Smith, apparently there's a nice little background with the Virginia governor O'Donnell, I believe it is. Anyway, he's really nasty operator. George Orwell, thank you for the deep dive into Watergate. Outstanding work.
Yeah, I think that these will survive for a long time. I know we're busy with a lot of other news, but I think these are kind of evergreen and they'll be around for years for people to piece them together and watch them at a later date. And I got to do it now because I'm in the middle of it now, so we're going to try to roll out Hunt in 2 weeks. Hunt will probably be 2 parts unless I can squeeze them into 1 part. But we're going to get them all. We did Liddy, and the last one is E. Howard Hunt. And there's a lot of, oddly enough, there are people, and, I don't know if Eugenio believes this, but he wrote about it in his article that McCord and Hunt and David Atlee Phillips, all 3 of them were in Dallas on November 22nd. It's a very interesting thing. He doesn't verify it, Eugenio, but he does mention it in his article.
That is a interesting crowd.
Yeah, all 3 have been named. Again, you know, as people say this George Bush in front of the building, everyone's in front of the building. I know it's, you know, these things have been debunked, and you've got this James Files resurgence all of a sudden, but we don't have time to go back and re-debunk other things, you know. But this is the first time I've heard about McCord. And I also heard that somebody said, first of all, I never heard that Fletcher Prouty was vouching for him, which was kind of weird. And then also that somebody said McCord was a Zap man for Helms. And Zap could be an electronic reference, but somebody said he was an assassin for Helms. So I've heard that also. I can't verify any of it, so I didn't want to bring it into the story because I've never heard of any gunplay involving McCord, but that was referenced by someone who knew him. That is wild.
That is wild. All right. New member, Charles Chillingworth. Thank you very much. And Doc 5758. After the plane crash, Dorothy Hunt, why were the FBI agents at the scene in Chicago before NTSB?
Well, there were local Chicago FBI, first of all, and there were different famous people on that flight. And according to Mae Brussel, there was arsenic found in the blood of the pilot. So who knows? And she had $10,000 in cash in her pocketbook, Dorothy Hunt, who was the paymaster of all the Watergate burglars. But it wasn't sequential bills. It wasn't the same batch of money. Again, Liddy was shredding money. I don't know why he was insisting on shredding money.
Liddy, there's always something going on with Liddy.
Dude, he was shredding money in the office with a shredder. I mean, the actual money. But anyway, the Hunt money was not the same as that money. And apparently they were investing in a Howard Johnson's motel or a Motel 6 or whatever the thing was in Nicaragua or some bullshit story. But the $250,000 in life insurance did pay out to Howard Hunt, her husband. But again, people did sign that life insurance thing back in those days. People commonly would, it was right there when you boarded the plane in the terminal. And most people did it back in those days. It wasn't that uncommon, but man, oh man, $10,000 in her purse, and then he gets $250,000 paid out by the insurance company.
Amazing, amazing. Now, we appreciate the super chats, everything else. If you do want to support us, though, you can help us out. We've got some coins. If you guys want to show your support, never know where you meet up in the crowd. It's America's Untold Stories.com/coin. And Mark has one, and Mark can tell you, I mean, this is a thick little coin. It's almost a full ounce. And
it's heavy.
Wonderful artwork done on it. It's put together by a veteran. I try to make it a point of getting with veteran-owned U.S. businesses. This is a local guy in Florida. He's not a giant business. And the other thing, I mean, get some coffee, folks.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, you can't. I can't make it through the day without my coffee. I've got some coming in. My wife is going, okay, when's it going to get here? When's it going to get here?
Really?
So she's having to dig into other flavors. So she gets the flavored coffee, but the truly great coffee is the AUS blend, which is a straight breakfast blend, widest appeal out there. They do have wonderful flavored coffees too. If you guys like them, you can go to americasuntoldstories.com/coffee, and you can get literally our breakfast blend. If you want to get orange coffee like the wife, I don't know why. A lot of women like orange coffee. It's very
orange coffee. I've never even tasted orange coffee.
I'm not kidding. It's an orange chocolate truffle, I believe.
Of his or just in general?
Yeah, he makes it. No, she had an orange coffee that she wanted to have a long time, or she loved for a long time at Fresh Market, and they stopped having it.
Whoa.
She looked everywhere, and it turns out that Phil, who does our coffee, his wife likes orange coffee. So he created an orange coffee for his wife. It's weird.
I just want to tell you, supposedly I'm speaking at the Republican Club in Pasadena tomorrow night. If anybody's there, it's apparently some big dinner. I'm the speaker. So I just got to remember to get this together by tomorrow night. Apparently,
yeah,
it's a Trump themed group. I will find out tomorrow, but it's like some chicken dinner, and then I'm going to speak extemporaneously. She's asking me if if I wanted a projector or a slideshow. I'm going. So I said I needed a Bell and Howell 384H. Just made it up, and she said, "Why? What are you going to do?" I said, "I'm going to show family films of us in the Catskills." She says, "What?" So this woman, I said, "Lady, it's okay. I know what I'm doing." She goes, "Well, what are you going to talk about with Trump?" I go, "I don't know. We'll figure something out." Wow, some fundraiser for them, for the. Well, I'm going to talk about that. I'll tell you right now. I'm going to talk about that guy Hockman, the rat.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah, because it's a local Republican organization. Definitely talk about that, and the RFK thing and the Trump rally the other day in Phoenix.
And then Jack Smith, possibly. I mean, at this.
Yeah, I don't know much about it, so we'll see what happens with that. But Rich Barris will be on Friday at 6 o'clock, and I talked to Rich today, and I said there was a consult poll about the bounce that Harris got from the DNC, and it said the bounce was only 4 points, and I asked Rich about it. And he said the poll is completely fictitious, which he always says about that poll. So I said, well, what was the bounce that she got? And he said 0. So I said, let's talk about that on Friday. How could it be 0?
But that's what I was telling you. I was like, I'm not
0?
seeing anything. So
okay, well, he's got the numbers. He's going to come on Friday and talk about the numbers.
Well, I think that the RFK could have blunted the bounce. That's what I was talking about.
Right, but she still must have had something, but maybe not. I don't know.
I mean,
don't know.
I'm sure it's minor, but if it's within the margin of error, that could be why he's saying 0.
Well, I mean, Barnes and him were talking about if she got a double-figure bounce, the election was over, and if she got under 9, it was still a Trump victory. But if she got 0, that's insane. They're not saying. He's saying literally 0,
right?
As a number,
right? And I mean, it could be so far. Maybe it hasn't rolled in yet. You'll start to see it come in. I don't know, but that could be part of the reason that charges are being filed through a grand jury.
Thank you.
Mean, it's like if the polls aren't holding up
well, that's why I'm sticking with him resigning and making her president part before Labor Day, before the debate. I mean,
before the debate for sure. Yeah,
they're monkeying with the debate now. They're monkeying with the indictments. He seems to be on vacation 24/7. James Rosen has been following his schedule closely, not physical schedule, the schedule they put in the book for him. And Rosen reported yesterday again. No entries. In other words,
he had one event. He spoke, and then he went on another 9-day vacation.
Yes,
back next Tuesday.
Clearly, somebody's meeting with foreign dignitaries. Somebody's doing something, and I think they're going to phase him out, and he's going to name her as the president.
But she's not doing anything either.
Right, but it would give her the gravitas of being president
and it would force Trump to address her as president,
Madam President. Madam President, Madam Pussyface, and now they're demanding hot mics. Eric, trying to entrap him into telling her to shut the F up.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
Well, we'll continue this discussion.
Yeah, we'll talk about this on Friday
and on locals here,
and locals in a couple of minutes.
And everybody just head on over to Locals. Again, unstructured.locals.com. There's a link in the description. It's free to be a member. There's over 18,100 or so free members. So plenty of room. And we hang out there after we leave here. And we're headed there now.
Okay.